Good morning, everyone. So this is a little different than what we normally do. We weren't able to do a Facebook Live video today. We're having a lot of issues with our Facebook account. We've tried to contact them multiple times, but we haven't really been able to get a solution. So this is the best we can do right now. We're still working on it, so I am sorry we couldn't do a live video, but hopefully this will make up for it and be just as good as a live video. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of review from Friday's lesson with Miss Alex. So on Friday, you guys talked about the deep ocean. So my first review question for you is, what is bioluminescence? Is bioluminescence light production, so creating light, or is it fish food? So what is bioluminescence? Is it creation of light, or is it fish food? If you chose light production, you are correct. So bioluminescence is the ability for these deep sea animals to create their own light. They kind of glow, so think of like a glow stick. Or think about that scene in Finding Nemo when they're in the deep, deep trench and they see that little light and it's attached to that anglerfish. So it's the ability to create light. All right, our next review question for you guys is, what is not an adaptation for deep sea animals? So guys, remember, an adaptation is something that they have developed to overcome an issue or overcome where they live. So birds have adapted to have wings and to fly. So what is not an adaptation for deep sea animals? Is it that they have big teeth? Is it that they are mostly colored green? Or that they are all meat eating? So what is not an adaptation for deep sea animals? Big teeth, green color, meat eating. All right, so if you pick the color green, you are correct. They are not all colored green, so that is not an adaptation. They do usually have big teeth, and they are mostly meat eaters. So down there are no plants, so they have to eat meat. Your animals in the deep sea are not colored green. They're all either red, clear, or black, because those are the only colors that you can't see in the darkness. So again, they're not going to be green. All right, the final review question from Friday is, what happens as you go deeper? So as you go deeper, is it A, pressure goes up, temperature goes down, or B, temperature goes up, pressure goes down? So which one is it? As you go deeper in the ocean, is it the pressure goes up and the temperature goes down, or is it that the temperature goes up and the pressure goes down? Which one do you think would it be? As you go deeper, what happens to the temperature and pressure? Think about submarines. Think about as you go deeper when you swim in the ocean, what happens? All right, guys, so the answer is that as you go deeper, the pressure goes up and the temperature goes down. So remember, as you go deeper and deeper, that pressure increases and it gets a lot colder. All right, so that was a good review. Let's go ahead and get started on our topic today. Our topic is coral disease. So this topic might not be the happiest of topics. It's not the best thing that's happening right now, but it is a very important issue and it's very important to learn about. It's very important for us to understand what's going on. So I will start with my first question for you guys. Do you think corals can get diseases? Yes or no? Can corals get diseases? Yes or no? What do you think? All right, so guys, the answer is yes, corals can get diseases. If they couldn't get diseases, we wouldn't be having this lesson today. So let's first, let me show you guys the worksheets that I created for you guys. So this is worksheet number 1. This is the pathogen worksheet. So it just has a picture of what the pathogens look like, and you can write the name, so what kind it is, and then you can color it in. Your coral diseases are usually linked to one of these types of pathogens. We have this bigger worksheet here. It's kind of like the worksheet you guys did for the invertebrates. This is probably better off more for the older students watching. Younger ones you definitely can. But this is pretty much just a summary of all the diseases that we're learning about today. And you can fill it in, and we're going to be posting the answer key later so you can check it. This is the last worksheet here. What you will be doing is you'll just be coloring on the corals with the certain diseases. So when you learn about this one, you're going to color onto this sea fan as to what the disease looks like. Because, guys, these diseases tend to look a little different, and they all affect different species of corals. So let's go ahead and get started. Go ahead and put this worksheet in front of you if you have it. If you don't, that's totally okay. You can go onto our blog on Reef Relief, and you can find these worksheets as well. So go ahead and take this out. And let's talk about pathogens. So guys, a pathogen is just the source of the disease. We have 4 main ones, but there are others. But the 4 main ones, the first one is a virus. So how viruses work is they invade the host cells within the body. Then they replicate and release damaged, infected cells. Antibiotics do not easily kill viruses. So examples of a virus is the common cold, the flu, measles, and yellow fever. Those are examples of viruses. All right. So the coronavirus is also a type of virus. All right. The next pathogen is bacteria. So bacteria is a single-celled organism, and it can live in almost any environment. Not all of them cause infections, and antibiotics can treat bacterial infections. So examples are strep throat, UTIs, Lyme disease, tuberculosis, E. coli, salmonella. Your next pathogen is fungus or fungi. So on here, I'll give you guys the answer to this. I do have a mushroom, but they don't all look like that. A mushroom is just a very popular type of fungus. The ones that would affect your corals are not mushrooms. They are different kinds. I just could not get a picture for you guys for the worksheet, so I put a mushroom. But fungus, there are millions of different fungal species. Only 300 are actually known to cause disease. They cause infection when they overgrow. So examples are yeast infections, ringworm, or athlete's foot. The last pathogen are parasites. So you guys actually remember learning about a parasitic relationship early on in our lessons. Parasites behave like tiny little animals, and they require a host. So we know that parasitic relationship, the parasite benefits, the host does not. It can spread through soil, water, food, blood, body fluids, and insect bites. So examples are malaria, lice, and things like tapeworms or other intestinal worms. So those are your 4 main pathogens, okay? So you guys can, since you guys aren't watching this live, you guys can pause the video and fill this out quickly. But I'll go ahead and move on. But just so you guys know, those pathogens, those are the 4 main ones that can be associated with these coral diseases. So the next question I'm going to ask you guys is, do we know the causes of all coral disease? So we can usually trace the pathogen, but do you think we can trace where that pathogen is coming from, or how it got into the ocean, or how it started to affect our corals? Do you think we always know the cause of coral disease? Yes or no? Again, do you think we know the cause of all coral diseases? Yes or no? All right, guys, the answer is no. We don't actually know the cause of all coral disease. That's what really makes this hard, is very few of the ones you're going to learn about today, we actually know why it happened and what's causing it. So another thing about coral disease is what it does is it injures the living tissue of that coral, which can cause death in part or the entire colony. As we've progressed in society, we've had more cases of coral disease. So as the population gets higher and as we advance, as we drive more cars, as we have more factories, as we build more, coral disease has also gone up with it. So again, the pathogens associated with coral disease can include virus, bacteria, fungus, and parasites. It's not always possible to even identify the pathogen. So some of these diseases, we don't even know the pathogen. High temperatures can also cause stress to the corals, so coral bleaching, that's a big thing. But higher temperatures can stress out that coral and can make it more vulnerable to getting a disease. So guys, again, if you're in a very warm environment, or if that coral's in a very warm environment, it is now much more susceptible to getting a coral disease. So if there's disease in the area, it's its immune system is getting weakened. It's the same with sunscreen, actually. So those certain sunscreens, chemicals, oxybenzone and octinoxate, when a coral is put in contact with those chemicals or high temperatures, its immune system kind of breaks down a little bit, and it's much easier for that coral to become diseased. So that's another thing to know about. All right, guys, my next question for you guys is, do you think humans can contribute to coral disease? Yes or no? Do you think humans can have a role in coral disease? Yes or no? Again, guys, do you think humans can contribute to coral disease? Yes or no? Can we be partially responsible for that disease? If you put the answer as yes, you are correct. So guys, a lot of coral disease is caused by humans to some degree. We don't always know how, but we are a huge factor in contributing to coral disease. Guys, think about higher temperatures. Humans, we've already talked about, are causing much higher temperatures in the environment, and that right there is causing a lot more corals to become diseased. So we absolutely can. So other things that can cause the spread of coral disease is the currents, such as the Gulf Stream down here. So currents can carry diseases to different reefs throughout the world. Direct transmission, such as touching. So if I touch a coral, I could be giving the coral some type of disease or some type of bacteria that I don't know I have on me. Other predation scars. So certain fish will eat corals, and that would leave an open wound. So think about when you guys get a cut, right? You should clean it. But if you don't clean that cut, it might get infected. So that's another thing that could happen. Snorkeling gear. So when you snorkel at different locations, that pathogen, that coral disease could be on your gear. And if you don't wash your gear between each snorkeling trip, you could be spreading it. It's just like if you sneeze into your hands and you touch something, and then you touch something else and something else and something else without washing your hands, it's the same thing. And finally, ballast water. So ballast water is kind of a strange term, but pretty much larger ships will actually suck up water to help make their ship buoyant, to prevent them from rocking around a lot. And when that big ship goes into a new port, it will actually discharge all that ballast water. And so that right there, they could be sucking up the coral disease that's in the water, and they could be releasing it to another area. That's a very, very common way to not only transmit coral disease to different areas, but invasive species. That's a popular way that invasive species will actually get transferred to different areas. They get sucked in through the ballast water of that ship, and then they get released to their new location. So guys, we have a lot of different coral diseases that we've experienced throughout time here. Again, they've mostly been popular within recent times. So from the 1970s to current day is when we've really been seeing a lot of coral disease. So I'll tell you guys about your first one. Your first one is called Aspergillosis. So guys, these names are a little silly, especially this one. So Aspergillosis affects your sea fans. Your sea fan is a type of soft coral, And what it does is it kind of looks like it creates little burn marks on that sea fan. So I'll show you guys right here. There we go. So that is Aspergillosis. It infects the little polyps, and then it looks like these little burn marks. It gets a very dark purple around the infection. We had outbreaks of this in 1995 and 1996 mostly, and it's linked to a common soil fungus. So we found the pathogen, it's a fungus, and we've linked it to a fungus found in the soil. They also have linked this to a mass death in the 1980s. And guys, although it's a common soil fungus, we're not exactly sure how a soil fungus caused this huge issue here, because it is a very common fungus to have in the ground, in the dirt. But some scientists do think that when we were digging the nearshore areas for bigger ships, like cruise ships, for example, we actually agitated a lot of that sand and sediment, and that fungus became more prevalent. And quite possibly it was during a very warm time of the year, so these sea fans were already very stressed. All right, guys, so my next question for you guys, a little review. Aspergillosis affects what type of coral? Is it staghorn, star coral, or sea fan coral? Aspergillosis affects what type of coral? Staghorn, star coral, or sea fan coral? I'll give you guys about a minute to make your guess. All right, guys, so the answer is the sea fans. Remember, it affects those sea fans, and your sea fans are a type of soft coral. So those right there. The next one is going to be whitepox disease. So guys, whitepox disease, it creates these like white patchy areas on elkhorn coral. It actually kind of looks like chickenpox in a way. So imagine that your elkhorn coral has chickenpox and it's white. So this right here is whitepox disease. So it's very splotchy. It can kill the tissue from about 50 to 80%, so it can kill a lot of the coral very quickly. This disease actually caused your elkhorn corals to be the first coral species listed as threatened. And guys, remember, that's not a good thing, because that means it could become an endangered species, which means that if we're not careful, it could go extinct, and we don't want that. So scientists have linked your whitepox disease to human fecal matter, pretty much. So it's an intestinal bacteria. So the thought is that it's from human fecal matter. And if you think more about it, there's a very high chance that maybe sewage entered into the area and it caused that whitepox disease. So again, guys, that's an example of one that we do actually have a good amount of information on. Most of the coral diseases that we have, we don't have that much information on. So the next one is called black band disease. This one's pretty straightforward. It creates a black band on the coral. So just like that you see there. So it creates that thin black band. It was first observed in Belize in 1973. The pathogen is a bacteria. And again, that band doesn't have to be that thick. It's only about 1 millimeter to 7 centimeters or so. It affects about 42 species of corals, specifically your brain coral, which is what you see here. Actually, no, I'm sorry, this is star coral. So it affects your star corals and your brain corals as well. Now, your black band disease is a bit more rare, because it actually needs several different bacterias to work together to create black band disease. So if you don't have all the 6 or so bacterias working together, then that coral will not get black band. So everything really has to work together. It's kind of like a puzzle. If all the puzzle pieces don't fit in with those bacteria, then the disease won't happen. Alrighty, guys. So another little review question. Black band disease is caused because why? Is it because it turns the whole coral black, or is it because it creates a black line on the coral? Why is black band disease called this? Does it turn the whole coral black, or does it create a black line on the coral? All right, guys, so the answer is that it creates a black line on the coral. So black band makes kind of sense, okay? The next one is white plague. So white plague was first recorded in Belize in the 1970s. So guys, Belize has about, most scientists say that Belize has the second largest barrier reef in the world. Remember, Florida Keys has the third. Australia has the largest. So Belize, it was first recorded in the 1970s. And then in Florida in the 1990s. This one was a really bad coral disease that we experienced. And it kind of works from the bottom up. It affects your brain and your star corals. And scientists have linked this to bacteria and also a virus. It destroyed 70 to 80% of Caribbean coral reefs. So the corals in the Caribbean, 70 to 80% of them died from this disease here in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So that's a very, very bad one. Again, it kind of creates a white, the white kind of moves up slowly. And one issue with this is that it does affect the star and the brain corals. For those that are unfamiliar with star and brain coral, those are actually the most important coral species to the reef. They actually build the reef. The staghorn, the elkhorn, the sea fans, you're not going to have them if you don't have brain and star coral. They build up the foundation so that way these other corals can grow on top. Staghorn, elkhorn, and sea fans are very, very very flimsy and fragile. So they need that hard structure created by the brain and the star corals to survive. So the biggest issue with this white plague is that it destroyed our very, very important reef builders. So the next one I have for you guys is called white band. So this makes sense as well. This is white band here. It works kind of similar to the last one as it works its way up the corals. But white band affects your staghorn, like you see in the picture here, and your elkhorn coral. So it does not affect your star coral, does not affect your brain coral. It affects your elkhorn and your staghorn coral. They're very, very fragile species of corals. We call them branching corals. It's linked to a bacteria. It was first reported in the 1970s. It begins at the base of the coral and works its way up the tips. And this right here destroyed 95% of all elkhorn and staghorn corals in the Caribbean. So if you think about it, that means that we were just left with just 5% living elkhorn and staghorn in the entire Caribbean of these species. So that's really, really bad. Again, guys, white band disease linked to a bacteria. Don't exactly know how this bacteria became an issue in the environment, what caused it, but we do know that it destroyed 95% of our elkhorn and staghorn corals, and that's not good. All right, the next one we have is called yellow band disease. So yellow band disease here is a very slow moving disease, and what it does is it actually goes inside the coral polyp and competes directly with the zooxanthellae. Remember, the zooxanthellae is that little algae that grows inside of the coral polyp and gives it energy and color. So this disease goes inside of that polyp and competes with the zooxanthellae. It was first discovered in 1996, and it begins as a blotch of yellow tissue and progresses slowly throughout the coral. It's mostly found in your star corals here. Okay. So guys, our last one here is a very, very, very important one to know about because it's the disease that we are currently having to deal with. It is called Stoney coral tissue loss disease, and it was first reported in 2014. So again, guys, this disease here is very important to know about no matter where you live because this is happening right now. And this is making a lot of scientists very, very nervous and very concerned. So again, it was first reported in 2014. It was believed to have started in Virginia Key. So Virginia Key is near Miami. It's in South Florida. So they believe it started around there. That's where the first infected corals were found. And it impacts over 20 of our corals. Now, the same thing here. It affects a lot of our brain and your star corals. So really the biggest issue with this disease is that this disease is now affecting and destroying all the corals, all the very important builder corals that survived all these other diseases. So these strong corals that have survived all this other disease are now dying because of stony coral tissue loss disease. So think of it as our last fighters are now becoming diseased from this here. If a coral gets this disease, between 60 to 100% chance that it will die. So there's a very high chance it will die. And scientists think that it is linked to a bacteria, and they think it is transmitted from coral to coral by the currents, by water movement. So they found it in different locations. They think that might be because of ships coming to and from different areas. The way the disease has moved throughout the Florida Keys, it's followed the Gulf Stream as well. So I'll show you guys this photo here. This is actually kind of crazy to think about. This here is an example of stony coral tissue loss disease. I'm sorry, the words are backwards. But if you look here, this little brain coral doesn't have a lot of it. Right here, this was in January 5th of 2017. About 5% of it's dead. The middle picture there is from January 19th, 2017. 20% is dead. By February 1st, 2017, 60% of that coral is dead. So that is very, very bad. It's a very fast-moving disease, and that's really one of the biggest issues, that it just keeps going and going, and it doesn't seem to slow down when the weather gets colder. So remember how I mentioned that a lot of coral disease works best in warmer temperatures and kind of sometimes goes away when it gets colder. But your stony coral tissue loss disease doesn't really slow down when the water gets a little bit cooled off. So that's a huge issue too. So we don't exactly know what caused this either. We don't really know how this disease kind of popped up, why it's so aggressive. Again, they think that, it's getting transferred through currents, from shipping traffic from boats as well. Near Virginia Key, there's a lot of activity. There's a lot of wastewater treatment centers. There's a bunch of cruise ships that are going near there. When this popped up, they were actually dredging or digging deeper channels in the nearby areas for the cruise ships to come in. So there's a thought that the sediment, when it came up, might have helped make this disease a little bit worse. Again, scientists don't really know. This also started during a very, very hot winter and a very hot summer. So that definitely helped kind of make it worse really quickly. Again, guys, it doesn't seem to slow down in cold water. Scientists do think it is a bacteria as a pathogen. And the reason scientists think that is because they are actually treating these corals with antibiotics, which I'll get into in a little bit. Now, this has made its way through most of the Florida Keys. So there's this map here that you can see. The red is, here we go. The red is where it's happened so far. So it's made its way throughout the Florida Keys and even up the East Coast. The green is where it hasn't been sighted yet, and the green is actually the Dry Tortugas National Park. So they haven't seen it there yet. The Dry Tortugas is actually 70 miles west of where I am right now. So it's got a ways to travel that way. Scientists haven't found it yet, but it could be out there. We don't know. So stony coral tissue loss disease, it creates white lesions and splotches on that coral tissue. I've had a lot of questions. How do I know if I'm looking at stony coral tissue loss disease or coral bleaching? Or any disease really. The biggest thing is that in coral bleaching, the coral kind of just turns white all at one time, and you can still see the living tissue on that coral. Because again, guys, a bleached coral is not dead, it's just very sick. It could get better if that zooxanthellae returns. With your other coral diseases, you're going to see dead tissue, and it's not going to happen all at once. So the coral bleaching, it's going to be white all at once. All these diseases is a very slow progression. As you saw in that photo I showed you, the white just kind of moves slowly over that coral, and then it'll leave a bunch of dead coral in its path. So there are quite a few things that we are doing. A lot of scientists are working on this. There's a lot of different task forces happening. A lot of people are very concerned. I want to talk about two of the main things that have been going on to help combat this disease. The first is the Coral Rescue Project. So out in the Dry Tortugas National Park, again, that's 70 miles west of here. It's a very beautiful place. They actually have some of the best coral left in our barrier reef. So in the summer of 2019, so last July, they actually collected 410 corals within the park. So they actually removed 410 smaller corals from the park, and they transferred them up to the University of Miami, and they have them in tanks right now. Pretty much the point is to prevent them from getting infected by the disease. So that way, when the disease finally runs its course, or when we've figured out what's going on, when we figured out more information, then they can use those corals to breed more corals and plant them back out into the area. So pretty much they rescued them so that way those little corals did not get sick, and they will go back into the ocean when this disease is no longer a main concern. The second really interesting thing that is happening is they're actually using medication to treat these corals. So my good friend, Dr. Karen Neely, has been working on treating these infected corals for a while now. So I mentioned how we know that we think this is a bacteria, and that's because it responds to different medications. So what they've been doing is they've actually been tagging corals and treating them with a paste, and that paste is very similar to Neosporin. So you guys know when you get a cut, you put Neosporin or another type of anti-inflammatory substance on your cut so it doesn't get infected. So what they use is it's kind of like a jelly paste, and it's got amoxicillin in it. Now, amoxicillin is actually a popular treatment that doctors will give humans for different types of sicknesses that we have. So they have this amoxicillin inside that paste, little jelly substance, and they will actually administer that little paste onto the sick coral. So just rub it on just like you would a cut, and that jelly will actually release the amoxicillin for 3 days. And they've actually had an 85% success rate on their corals that they've treated. Of the corals that Dr. Karen Neely's lab have treated, they have lost only 1% of it. Now that's really, really big. Okay, so guys, think about it. 85% success rate. They've lost only 1% of their coral that they've treated. That is huge. So that is a very, very big development within stony coral tissue loss disease. If you guys want to learn more about it, on our blog, I did provide a video. It's about 30 minutes. It's from PBS, and it actually follows these researchers and shows what they're doing with this. But this is a very, very important thing that is happening right now, and it's cool that we're using something that treats humans, amoxicillin that can treat humans, and now we're using it in a setting to actually help save these very, very important coral species. So guys, that's very, very important. And again, it's very important to know about these coral diseases. A lot of people don't realize that corals can get sick. One thing I do want to clarify is that even though corals can get sick and we can get sick, we can't give corals what we're sick with. So if I have a cold, if I go swimming, I'm not giving the coral that cold. There are other things that we do that can affect and cause corals to get diseases. But just like if I'm sick, I'm not going to get a coral sick. If a coral is sick and I swim in the water near that coral, I am not going to get sick. It doesn't work like that, okay? So guys, this is a huge issue, and it's kind of complicated to really think about. Again, a lot of these coral diseases, we don't exactly know what causes it. It's hard to get much information about it because corals are fragile animals. It's hard to extract all this stuff and learn more about these diseases from these tiny, precious little animals. So it may seem like a very, very big issue that might be very hard to overcome. However, there are a lot of things that you guys can do. Even if you live in the middle of the country, you don't even live near a coral reef whatsoever, there are things that you guys can do to help protect these corals from coral disease. The first thing is just minimizing our effect on climate change and our effect on water quality. So we've talked about this many times, but the world is getting warmer. And as the world gets warmer, those corals get very stressed. And if there are things that we can do to maybe make that less of an issue, like riding our bike, turning off our lights, using less plastic. So again, guys, get that reusable water bottle. Recycle. So make sure that if you use plastic or aluminum, make sure you recycle it properly. Know what your town can recycle. Those things right there actually will have a huge difference. If half of you start using reusable shopping bags and reusable water bottles instead of plastic, that actually makes a big difference. For those that do live near the ocean, when you go snorkeling, make sure that you're never touching corals, okay? That is a big no-no. And when you're swimming near them, make sure that you're not stirring up all the sand near it, because that disease can actually get stored in the sand and sediment. And if you're just kind of kicking your fins around, you could stir up that sand and you could kind of release that disease in the area. So make sure that you are snorkeling responsibly. Make sure that you are doing your part to, combat climate change, to help our water quality. So make sure you're not littering too. Use less plastic. Make sure you're using reusable sources. Those are all very, very easy things that you guys can do to make a difference and to help save our corals from coral disease. And not only will it protect the corals from coral disease, but it will also just protect everything in the environment as well. Making these choices in our life, getting less plastic in our lives, getting reusable resources, riding our bike, taking more walks instead of driving cars, that's ultimately going to make a difference. It may seem like a big problem, but think about if all of you make one change in your life, you guys have the ability to make a huge difference. All right, guys, so again, thank you for joining me today. I'm sorry this isn't a live video. We are working on it to our best ability. We're trying to figure out a solution here. Thank you so much. If you guys have more questions about this, please let me know. Please feel free to message us, comment a question. We will do our best to answer them. Fill out the worksheets, check your answers on our blog. Learn more about them. Check out the videos that I posted on our blog. On Wednesday, we'll be talking about plastics. And on Friday, Miss Alex is going to talk to you guys all about climate change. So guys, thank you again for tuning in and enjoy the rest of your day.